go through this message, three things I want you to look for and pray how God would want to apply them in your life. And I want you to look for them in the text that we're preaching. The first one is this: men who eagerly listened yesterday when it seemed irrelevant are in a position to be used by God today. Men, and you don't have to write down verbatim, just the gist of it. Men who eagerly listened yesterday, you're going to see that in this passage. When it seemed irrelevant, they couldn't figure out the reason why they should be listening. It didn't seem like it really related to them. They were in a position to be used by God today. They just didn't see it all coming. Secondly, God used men who by voice obedience were willing to go back into risk that others were leaving. God used men in this passage who by voice obedience, just simply listening to what God said and saying, I'll do that by faith, who were willing to go back into risk that others were leaving. Others were fleeing. You say, I don't see that passage in the passage. Well, hold on, you will, I think. And then thirdly, and we'll mention these again at the end of the message, God used remembrance times where parents played a crucial part in teaching the next generation. God used remembrance times where parents played a crucial part in teaching the next generation. Okay, all set? Got it all down? If you're like my class decades ago, they say, wait. Well, at the end, you'll get it again, so hang in there. Remember can anybody fill in the blank in American history? That wonderful class that you had and you loved so much. Remember the Alamo. All right, that's one. But there are more than one well-known in American history. Remember can you name another one? You know what? Yeah, I don't remember anybody ever actually say, remember the Lusitania. But that is memory-worthy for sure. The sinking of the Lusitania. How about remember the Maine? Remember the Maine? You ever heard of that one? So I'm looking around. Most of you you didn't quite reach that time period in history, did you? Okay, those two events, remember the Alamo, remember the Maine, were separated by a half a century. In both cases, whoever came up with those commands, those decrees, those exclamations, they were not simply asking people, well, just call it back into memory, remember the details. That was not the point in either one of them. Both of them were calls to remember something and then to take appropriate action, right? Remember the Alamo. And I don't mean just remember what happened there, hundreds of men dying, Texans dying. I mean, remember this when we come back and reconquer it. Remember the Maine. Don't allow a ship in Havana Harbor to sink to the bottom. Whoever was responsible for sinking it, that's a different question. But do something about it. In both cases, something big was done about it. A call to action based on what you are remembering. Memorial stones, remembering. There are 24 of them in this passage, but let's look at verse 1 of chapter 1. Now, when all the nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, verse 2, take for yourselves 12 men from the people, one man from each tribe, and command them, saying, take up for yourselves 12 stones from here out of the middle of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet are standing firm, and carry them over with you, and lay them down in the lodging place where you will lodge tonight. All the nation made it across. Now, that means that God completely kept his promise. Those first two verses, it's easy just to cruise right by them and just say, okay, it's just a fact. No, it's not. It's a statement of God having said much earlier, I will do this, and now he shows he actually does it in this generation. He delivers the whole nation across. Can you imagine what that would look like? It's almost wrong for me not just to pause. Millions, probably millions, of the children of Israelites crossing over this 19-mile stretch of empty riverbed and heading We're going to find out, not just kind of wandering and meandering, not just staring into puddles, or I love this is my great phrase, or making daisy chains, just kind of wasting time. They were crossing for a reason. And that will be, God willing, in a couple weeks. We'll talk more about that. Now, the Levites are standing, verses 2 and 3, with the ark in the midst of the riverbed, while all Israel crosses over. But there is still unfinished business to take care of before we kind of close the chapter on the Jordan River. This is business that affected that immediate generation, and frankly, folks, this is business that has affected worshipers of the Lord God for thousands of years. Now, remember the men, the 12 men, last chapter, I remember them, okay, 12, each representing a tribe of Israel. Remember how in the previous chapter they were told that you're to be ready? We're choosing you for a reason, but there was no reason that was given to them, right? In chapter 4, you just heard a few moments ago, read, the reason is actually given to them now. So patient waiting, right? Not just saying, hey, if I'm not given a good explanation, I'm not going to do this. Patient waiting actually bears fruit in the lives of these 12 men, just like it does in God's people's lives, right? You don't understand a lot of what's going on. And the younger you are, I don't know, is it fair to say the less you understand of what's really going on and what's going to happen in the future as God directs you? So God tells Joshua to command these 12 to, now watch this. Now, he prayed a moment ago about details, that God would show us details. I think there are crucial details in this passage that when we slow down and understand what's going on, it makes you understand the faith that these men have got to exhibit as God leads them through this riverbed and toward Jericho. So you remember those men, those 12 men. Joshua is to tell all 12 of them. Now, we just read, the whole nation crossed. Did everybody follow that? The whole nation crossed, and they're on Canaan land. They're on the shore, on the west bank. That means Joshua at this point has to command men who are on the west bank. They're not over here, the last guys to come across. They're already safely on the west bank with everybody else. So he has I try to picture, what does this look like? To say, you guys over there? I don't know. It's probably hundreds of yards. Or did he just simply wave them toward himself? But he commands them, and now in the middle of this Jordan River bank, or bed, you have the Levites and an ark, and these 12 men and someone else. I don't know if you ever wondered where Joshua was in all of this. We know where he is. And in verses 2 and 3, the word here, if you look at it, here. You use the word here, like if I ask my wife, would you please come here? That means I want her to come to where I am right now. And Joshua is commanding that these men on the western bank of the Jordan River are to come here where the stones are located. Where is that? That's in the middle of the Jordan River. Where's Joshua? By every account, he is standing alongside of the Levites with the Ark of the Covenant, and these stones are right not far away. Now, verse 10, just for a moment. Look, and I know that's not part of our passage, but it's important for us to read this. For the priests who carried the ark were standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything was completed, that the Lord had commanded Joshua to speak to the people. According to all that Moses had commanded Joshua, here's where I want you to focus. And the people did what? They hurried and crossed. Now, wouldn't you have? I thought about this. Do you ever put yourself in, I believe God, but I'm not going to be wasting any time in the dry bed of the Jordan River. Are you? As far as we understand, God said he would do it. He didn't say he was going to delay. When the last of the nation was across, what should you expect? This releasing 19 miles up the river at Adam, this wall of water making its way, and probably even now making its way as that last person. That's what you would be thinking, right? Nobody in their right mind wants to be in the bed of the Jordan River, when you think the last Israelite is getting up on the bank of the west bank of the Jordan River. So you say, Pastor, that's all very interesting, but why am I interested in that? Because that kind of puts what Joshua is doing right now and these Levites in a little bit different light, doesn't it? Could it be a little knees knocking? Of all the people that you wouldn't want to lose for getting this wrong, Joshua is one that you would not want him to mess up this whole idea, right? It would have been couldn't it have been easy for him to cross over the Jordan River with everybody on the West Bank and to talk to the guys, and these 12, and say, you see where the ark is there, and you see where the Levites are? You go back into that. But he doesn't do it. He's already there. Now, I don't have this all figured out, but I know this much. Joshua is not asking these 12 men or the Levites to exercise faith that he himself was not willing to exercise by example. He wasn't telling them. You ever have people say, I think this is what you should do in your Christian life. Well, are you doing it? No, but I think this is what you ought to do, right? I think you ought to be having a Bible time that's a great thing, right? So how is yours going? Well, not so well, but I think that's going to really help you if you do that. Or whatever, right? So he's actually exemplifying. If they lose Joshua, they're in trouble, right? So the cost would be great. It sounds like faith to me, doesn't it to you? So we know what God has called these 12 as they make their way back into the bed of the Jordan River. We know what they're called to do. You read it a moment ago. Each one was to find a stone, not a stone, but something they could hoist up big enough to put on their shoulder and bring it back over to the west bank of the Jordan River. And eventually, we're going to find out, I think in the next passage of chapter 5, it will be placed in a place that would be given the name Gilgal. So they willingly obey. This ought to be a shock for us. The first 3 chapters, God says it. He tells Joshua. Joshua says, okay. Joshua conveys the command to God's people. And guess what? They do it. I mean, how different from 40 years in the wilderness this is. I don't know what else to make of this. God didn't see fit to tell us that they argued with Joshua. Apparently they didn't. And God loved that. And he still does, doesn't he? I want you to do this. Okay. One of the striking truths about Elijah, one of my favorite Old Testament prophets, is when God told him to do something, he got up and did it. That might just blow right on by you, but this was voice obedience for Joshua and for Elijah as well. So we know what they are called to do. They did it without arguing at all, and they did this. They went back to, watch this, they went back into a place where everybody was in a hurry to get out. Right? Now, what would you have thought about that? Everybody's getting out of this. And you want us to go back in there? September 11th, you all know that. We're coming up on another year where we remember that. A man named Commander Richard Picciotto, I think I got that close, who's the highest ranking firefighter on the location of the Twin Towers. And he is responsible for saving. We think of all the people horribly who lost their lives. But there would have been thousands more. And many people attribute the fact that there were not thousands more, humanly speaking, to this commander, Picciotto. He entered a place where everybody was running away. Does it sound familiar? He went like a lot of other firemen did, entered a place where everyone else was running from. He tells us that all I remember inside that tower was there's an immense, I'm quoting him, an immense sound, and then utter silence and darkness. I think, he looked around and realized that I'm still alive. He was encapsulated in this air pocket in one of those towers, and eventually was one of the last ones out, extricated from the towers. His actions saved thousands and provided an example for at least one person, his integrity and his courage, provided an example for one man named William Javis, who became, after watching the example of this commander, became a volunteer firefighter in Alum Creek. We know the what, verse 5, what they're commanded to do. They're commanded to go, you're going to go back in there when everybody else is running out, has just run out. We know the what, but the question then is what? Why? What's so important that you'd want to do this? That God would want you to do this? Look at me at verses 6 and 7. Let this be a sign among you, so that when your children ask later, saying, what do these stones mean to you? Then you shall say to them, because the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, when it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall become a what? A memorial, a remembrance to the sons of Israel forever. There will come a time, can I put it in our language, maybe paraphrase a little bit? There will come a time when the curiosity of your children will awaken as they walk among these 12 stones that these 12 men deposited on the west bank of the Jordan River. That time, you just count on it, there will come a time when their curiosity will be awakened. What is with these 12 stones? I'll call this, those of you who are teachers, Sunday school teachers and formally teachers, I remember years ago when we were taught about teachable moments. Have you heard that phrase, teachable moments? In essence, what God is saying is there will come a time with your children when there is going to be a teachable moment, and it may not be an enduring moment. It may be for a moment. And I want you to be prepared for when that teachable moment takes place. Those of us who are parents, and someday those of you who will be parents, and those of us who are grandparents, how we love that, right? When I taught history, you got to love teachable moments in history because you get so few of them, it seems like. But it's how much more is it when you preach the Word of God, or when you take the Word of God, Grandma and Grandpa, or Mom and Dad, and you talk to your children, and they look up at you and they go, oh, why? That's precious, right? Why, Grandma? Why, Grandpa? Why, Mom? Why, Dad? Questions like this, I remember this with my own daughter. Teachable moments, she's in the back seat. I've told you this several times, so let me do it one more time. She's in the back seat, I'm driving her to preschool, and she's asking questions. What's God like? Wow. That's pretty good when you get questions like that. That's the Lord, right? What's God like? What does it mean to follow God in faith? Or how about this one? Mom, Dad, why do you do for the Lord what you do? Why? You ever had anybody ask you that question? Any of your kids ask you that question? Why are we doing this? This was a teachable, when you Israelites, one day you parents, you're going to go through this experience, and your kids are going to look to you and they're going to see these stones and say, what are the stones about? There it is. You've got your chance, right? In fact, one that you ought to be praying about, right? We parents, can I say something to our young ones just for a second? I do want you to hear this. If you never have, these are the things that your parents long for with you. They do. They just don't. Isn't it true, moms and dads, grandma, grandpa? We long for those moments when, and they seem so fleeting. They come, it's like the Spirit of God is in it. He awakens you, and you ask why, or what, or can you explain this? And we long for that. And then when it happens, when they're out of elementary school, where they're still asking those questions, wow! Teachable moments. So you noticed in verses 6 and 7, right? Did you notice that God did not call a press conference, if I can put it this way, and say, we're going to have a meeting of the Levites. You know, the guys who are carrying the ark. They were the guys. They saw all of this. I mean, what didn't they see? So there's going to be a meeting of the Levites up here around Gilgal, where all those stones are, and all the kids, as soon as they're all settled in, all the kids are invited to come and listen to the Levites talk to you about what this was all about. Is that what happened? It is not what happened. I think the Levites could have done a great job, right? I mean, who? But no, I want your parents to do it. I want your mother and your father to explain to you. When the day comes, when God awakens your heart as a young person, or maybe not so young person, and you, why, God, why? I want your mother and your father to be the first ones to speak to that. You know, that doesn't surprise me, because Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7, verse 8, when he said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God. And he gives all these incredible ways, fully, totally. And in verse 7, he makes it clear, and how the next generation is going to hear this is from you, Mom and Dad. Not from Moses. So Moses will teach too, and they're priests, I know it, right? But it's from you. And I deliberately want you to be the one. I think of our own folks. You know, I realize I'm talking first about Israel here, but there have been times when people have said, Pastor, could you come over to our house and you know, I don't know that I can quite do this with my son or my daughter or somebody in my family. I just feel like I just fumble that. And it's happened in 20 years several times. I'd fumble at that. I'd rather have you do that. And absolutely, sure, right. But I got to tell you something. In my mind, I'm trying to figure out how can I get Mom and Dad involved in this? Because there really is something to Mom and Dad being the ones who teach their kids about the Lord, about his ways, about why you do what you do, you know, about what God is like. You know, it's one thing for a Levite. It's one thing for a pastor to say this, but I'm telling you, when Mom and Dad say it, it's something you'll never forget, right? So they were to be, verses 6 and 7 make it clear it was to be the parents who did this. And they probably, you know, they explained the first 12 stones that would be pulled up out of the Jordan River and placed at Gilgal. But, you know, verse 8 tells us that there were 12 more stones that would be taken and placed in the river itself. Now, this was what we mentioned to some of you who had the privilege of being here on Wednesday night. And I told you I would give you a few insights into this. My first question is, how are you going to see those? Right? Isn't this a waste of time? To take 12 more stones and put them in we don't know. A lot of us just assume they're all stacked up, right? I tend to believe that as well. But there's nothing clear about exactly how they're arranged. 12 stones. Probably at least in the river it was stacked up. I'm telling you, you know, that river can run a lot deeper than that. But they tell us, remember, this is harvest time. So the water was at its highest level at this point that you would probably see all year long, which meant the rest of the year, what would the water level likely do? It would start to drop and drop. And there are times when the water level would be, You've seen the Jordan, remember? Were you impressed by how deep it was? No. There were droughts, and lo and behold, you look out there across from Jericho in the middle of the Jordan River and go, what is that? Can you imagine that 200 years later? What is that? So they were ready to give moms and dads were to be ready to give detailed, thoughtful answers that would honor God as a mighty, delivering, promise-keeping God. That is still the responsibility of moms and dads, right? To tell our children about that God that we know. But it wasn't just simply the facts, and this is important. It's one thing to have mom and dad recite facts. It's something totally different when they have fire in their belly when they do it. You know what I mean? Yeah, somebody, we seem to remember that, 3 generations ago, honey, how'd that all go? Or how about this? You know what? My grandma was there. You should have seen her face when she recounted the faithfulness of God. And you should have seen her face when she said to us, go down to the riverside, you look. And when you do, you'll know. And if that's not enough, when we go through a drought, there's a blessing to droughts. If there's ever a blessing to droughts, look into the Jordan River and you will know God is faithful. It's the same God, right? Wouldn't you say that's a little different than saying, well, back in the day, the year was such and such, and what a difference, right, Mom? Dad? What a difference. The same thing's true of the gospel, isn't it? We can recount the facts accurately about the gospel and about how God, the same God who delivered across the Jordan River, who delivered through the Red Sea, delivers people from sin and into a relationship with his Son, Jesus Christ. It's one thing to say that, and this here tract says this is, this. You can read it with me, right? What does that say? It's another thing to say, honey, I was lost. Your mom and your dad, I was lost. I'm not going to give you all the details of that, but I really was so far from God. I was like that sheep, Isaiah 53, that was going astray. That was me, and I knew it, right? But the Lord hath laid upon him the iniquity of us all, and I have never been the same since then. That's different, isn't it? When our hearts and our eyes are aflame with the truth of what we want to teach our boys and girls and our grandsons and our granddaughters about the faithfulness of God. Let me just close with this. Didn't even think about this until now. In Romans chapters 9 through 11, Paul was broken over the fact that his fellow Jews were condemned by God without faith in Christ. I mean, you won't survive in eternity. There's a real heaven, there's a real hell, right? He said I was broken over this to the point where I wept over them. Wouldn't you say it's different to go to the Jews who are in Rome and say, well, let me give you Romans 6:23 and Romans 2:20 or 3:23 and Isaiah 53, and now you just go ahead and read those. That's a little different than saying, you know what, I used to be lost, so far away from God. So I know exactly what you're going through. And now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. You know what? That doesn't just save. It saved a wretch like your dad, right? Me. Like your mom, like your grandma and your grandpa. It's never left me the same. God's been faithful all this time. It's different to go to your relatives and weep over them, isn't it? It's different than just simply giving them a factual gospel tract. Friends, listen, it was a blessing, really. It was not a chore when little ones were asking questions about those stones. This was not something that should just be, honey, come back, Dad's busy. Mom's busy. They come back maybe one more time. Oh, Dad's busy with something else. Mom's busy with something else right now. But later, I'll give you the story later on. Parents were wise to take the time to shepherd their little kids through who God was, right? I'll tell you one of the reasons why. Because the day was going to come. End of this book of Joshua. I don't know if we'll get there, but I'll give you the heads up on this. In Joshua 24, Joshua warned the children of Israel, the day is going to come when you're not going to have time for God anymore. You're going to be tempted to not have time for him at all. Oh, no. And they said that. Oh, no, not us. We're good, right? We saw what he did. And then you turn to Judges chapters 1 and 2. And that is just the next generation, maybe 2, but not more than that. And then you discover this horrible statement that the young people, that next generation, did not, I'm quoting from Judges 2:10, did not know the Lord or his works. How does that happen? I know we can immediately say, well, the kids weren't interested. They didn't even know his works. So that's not the kids, right? That's us. They didn't tell them anymore, right? They just don't seem very interested. I'm just, I don't have time for that. Or maybe my heart's just gotten cold. Can happen, can it? Right? Take those treasured moments. Take them. They are teachable moments. And in the history of God's people, they came and they're gone, right? Maybe as you're sitting there right now, maybe that's what you need to do today, right? I'm grateful. I still every once in a while have that teachable moment opportunity. And the older I get, the more I think, wow, whenever your grandkids ask questions or your kids ask questions about God, if you can, put it down for a moment, right? So the next generation will know him and his works, just like these Hebrews should have. Let's bow our heads together, would you, please? We mentioned the men who eagerly listened yesterday when it seemed irrelevant are in a position to be used by God today. I wonder if our men and our ladies say,